So the first one from Raghav Khurana. Thanks for the question. What has been your best and worst business decision till date?
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, going back to what I was saying earlier, I've never really thought of these as, my two companies as businesses. I've thought about them as services. They each have a particular purpose, and they serve a customer base. And our job is to make sure that we are making decisions for them. That's what they're paying us to do with their attention or with their money. And they're paying us to understand the context of everything that's happening, all the secular trends within the world, all the technology that's available to us. So it's more about what are the best or worst decisions, period. And I think the worst decision is waiting to make a decision, at least in my experience. Because when we're waiting to make decisions, everything stalls, and it blocks all progress, and it blocks all creativity and invention and innovation, which comes from that. So I think at my worst, I haven't been able to make a decision. And maybe I didn't make a decision because I was afraid of failing, or that decision being a mistake. And I've learned over time that it doesn't really matter, because if we're making decisions in the context of who we're serving and building the service up, then it's never too late to do the right thing. It's never too late to correct a mistake, to admit the mistake, to correct it, and to move on. Most importantly, move on. So I think the worst decision I've ever made was not to make decisions or to make them too slowly. The other worst decisions tend to be around people. I think companies and organizations and universities are obviously comprised of people. And the most important thing to get right is how they work together, or more importantly, how they don't work together. And when you recognize that people don't work together, if you're not doing everything in your power to change it so that they can work together, it really makes the whole company suffer if that lasts. In the category of best, it's whenever we choose to put who we serve before our own interest. And anytime we do that, I'm really proud. And that comes in small ways, and it comes in very large ways. But if we put our own interests before the people that we serve, then ultimately we'll become irrelevant, because we won't be relevant to the people that we're intending to serve, because we're too self-centered and too much focused on protecting what we have, instead of really disrupting ourselves to understand what might be possible and how we might invent into the future.
Thank you. The next question here is from Abhishek. In light of India's rapidly transforming online news and social networking infrastructure, what role should Twitter be playing as a market leader and trendsetter?
Well, I mean, I think whether you're an individual or you're in school, or whether you're a company or leading a company, I think we should always pay attention to the social trends around us and the norms around us, and ideally pushing to make them better. I want to help build a society that works in a healthy way together, and whatever we can do from a technology perspective, we should do that. And health is always evolving. To me, it's a matter of balance. I think, the world is facing some problems today that aren't going to be solved by any one particular community or nation. It has to be done through global cooperation. Everything happening with climate change, everything happening with artificial intelligence, and what will be able to do, and the displacement of work because of it, disruption because of it, are things that only will affect the entire world, and only the entire world will be able to solve some of these problems. So for our part, I think one of the most critical and impactful ways to solve problems is conversation. We need to acknowledge what needs to be fixed. We need to address it and we need to fix it. We need to give each other regular updates about how it's being fixed. And if Twitter can be a conversational medium to do that, then great. And I think it can, because it's inherently public, because everyone is on the same level, and ideally through greater accessibility, through making sure that we encourage more people into using the technology, we can help enable that.
A few questions here from Ishan, but we'll focus on the first one. What's your favorite hashtag, the one that you love the most? No pressure, choosing.
I don't know if I have power of 18. It's facing
on cue. Well done, Jack.
It's always right ahead of me. One of my favorite aspects of Twitter is trending topics, and I love it because there are so many hashtags, and the hashtag represents discussion. The hashtag represents conversation. It represents debate, and at our best, it's very civic debate. It's very civil debate. At our worst, it's pretty toxic, and we understand this.
Given the upcoming, this question is from Shivang. Given the upcoming 2019 elections in India, what steps are social networking giants taking to curb the spread of fake news?
So I think we have to, in a number of conversations I've had, it's become more important to make sure that we scope the problem as tightly as possible. Because fake news as a category, or misinformation as a category, is just way too big. If you read *Sapiens*, you know that the evolution of our species is actually determined by misinformation and gossip. The reason that we evolve faster than our ecosystem is because of misinformation and because of gossip. And why is that? It's because I can say something up on the stage like, "There's a tiger right behind you, and what we're going to do is we're going to exit slowly this way, we're going to walk slowly and go out those doors, and that tiger will stay right over there." And obviously there's not a tiger there, not that I can see, but all of you could imagine that. You can imagine yourselves walking to the doors, and that was a complete fiction. I just told you a lie. I just spreaded misinformation. That was complete fake news. No one called it out as fake news, but there's no tiger there, and you don't have to leave right now. So we have to make sure that we're scoping this problem down as tightly as possible. What's the problem with fake news? What's the critical problem with misinformation? It's when it misleads people into taking an action. So one example of this that we saw on Twitter before the US 2016 elections is that someone tweeted an image with a shortcode, a code that you can SMS to, and the text of the tweet said that if you text this shortcode, you would actually be registered to vote. And that was a complete lie. It was misinformation. And it was misleading people to an action to make them think that they registered to vote so they could participate in the 2016 presidential election in the United States. If they did that, they actually would not have been registered. That is dangerous. So our job is to make sure that we're identifying not misinformation, because misinformation also comes in the form of jokes. A joke is misinformation. It's not that it's misinformation, it's the context of the information. It's the intent behind the information. And if it is intending to mislead, we need to understand and pick out the misinformation. And then our job is to make sure it doesn't spread. And our job is to make sure that it doesn't gain in impressions beyond its earned reach. So in that voter suppression tweet that I just gave you an example of, the number of tweets calling it out as fake was 10x the number of tweets, the number of impressions that the original tweet got. So the network actually saw it as fake, called it out as fake, and those tweets had more impressions than the original tweet itself. And that's really powerful. We can't rely upon that. So we need to make sure that we're identifying not misinformation, but misleading information, and that we're doing our job to not spread that content beyond its reach, and certainly not to anyone who hasn't explicitly asked for it. So this is a multivariable problem. There's not going to be one fix. It's going to be something like security, in that no one can build a perfect lock that no one else can break into. Someone else is always going to find a way to break any lock that any human designs. Maybe an AI can build a lock that we can't determine how to break into. But the important thing about security is not building for perfection, it's building to stay 10 steps ahead of everyone else, to constantly change the lock or constantly change the code so that you're always 10 steps ahead of any attacker. And we'll have to have the same approach with misleading information. We'll have to stay 10 steps ahead. We're not going to build a perfect solution. It's not possible to do. There'll be a lot of technologies to help us, but it won't be possible to get to perfection.
Great. And one final question. This question you've never got, Jack, at all. So Ivan Mehta wants to know when he can get the edit button.
Oh, I thought you said when he can get verified. How many of you want an edit button? By a show of hands. Raise your hand if you want edit. Wait. Raise your hand if you don't want edit. You don't want us to make edit. Some of you didn't raise your hand, so it's a very binary choice. I don't know what's going on here. Look, when we hear about the edit button, we usually hear you have to pay attention not to what people are asking for, but the use cases. Like, what's the question behind the question? And a lot of people want edit because they make mistakes on Twitter and they want to quickly fix them. They don't want to look bad. So I misspelled something, or I tweeted the wrong URL, and I want to correct it. So that's a lot more achievable than allowing people to edit any tweet all the way back in time. Because what happens with that? If I say something I tweet something that you agree with, and then you retweet that, and then I edit my tweet to something that you disagree with, yeah. You've retweeted now something that you disagree with. And that's what we need to prevent. And there's a bunch of things that we could do to show a change log and show how a tweet has been changed. And we're looking at all this stuff. But ultimately, we need to make sure that we are solving a real problem and solving a use case that people are seeing as friction within the service, and making that easy for people to do. So we've been considering edit for quite some time, but we have to do it the right way. We can't just rush it out, and we have to make sure that we're actually solving the predominant reason why people would do it first and foremost, and then not making something that's distracting or takes away from the public record in doing so, because I think it's really critical that we preserve that.